breathtaking
I
speed.
I
Sorry.
think in 2 years we'll get a lot of clarity around what's the impact that it will have on all the companies. Interestingly, you mentioned that some companies are going on with having AI part of the systems to be more efficient. Some of them are not jumping into that yet. Do you see also that the size of the company is also one of the factors? I've been seeing a lot of the small organizations really quick in jumping on that bandwagon.
Yeah.
Where some of the bigger legacy type of organizations thinking twice or thrice about it. What are your thoughts around that?
So my hypothesis, Nick, would be follows. Smaller companies have less controls,
Yeah.
Yeah,
right? Bigger
yeah,
companies have high controls. And this is hypothesis. I might be
Right.
wrong,
yeah,
Right.
right?
yeah,
But today, if I start a company like the company that Raju or me or you have started,
yeah,
I mean,
Right.
yeah,
we pretty much decide what to do,
Yeah.
right? We don't
yeah,
have to go through a executive board
yeah,
presentation to figure out
yeah,
what do we do as a capability. And therefore, it's nimble, it's fast, it's
mm,
efficient.
yeah,
Whilst if you're
mm,
looking at a company of a 15 billion or $20 billion company, the
yeah,
implications or the impact is pretty high. And
mm,
therefore, you're right, absolutely, that it's easier for smaller companies to experiment on
mm,
that versus a
mm,
big company. And thereby, you'll see very strategically big companies picking up small companies. So here
yeah,
I'll give you an example of what's happening in India. There are family-owned companies like the Tatas who are picking up amazingly high capable, small, nimble,
yeah,
agile firms with
Mm.
yeah,
big implications on, and they're
mm,
doing a lot of work as you alluded to around,
mm, mm,
because
mm,
they think, okay, let's try it with a small company, see it works. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's,
mm,
yeah,
These
you're
are the smaller
absolutely right.
startups, right? That they are there.
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
And this is
exactly.
yeah,
not
yeah,
Tata's. I'm saying this is representative. I mean,
Just
there
yeah,
are
yeah.
enough
yeah,
and more
yeah, yeah,
examples across the world.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Taiwan is a case in point. I mean, there's a big company
yes,
in Taiwan, typically at the electronic sector, who's picking up smaller
yeah,
capabilities.
Mm.
yeah,
Iran is again another company.
mm,
So
mm,
you're absolutely right. Smaller companies have high risk appetite,
yes,
whilst bigger companies have
yeah,
control and risk issues.
yeah.
So
Mm.
And I guess the smaller companies want to really grow fast at exponential rates, so they're willing to try all of these things to get ahead.
yeah, and they figured out the trick. The trick is go to a big company, tell them we can turn this around,
Yeah.
you know,
Yes.
half a time as you would turn
That's
this
it.
around in your company,
Yeah.
Yeah.
at half the cost.
Yeah.
That's
And
the
so
selling IP for them.
Yeah.
absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean,
That's the
today,
value.
absolutely. And today, that's what I would do. I
Yeah.
would go to
Yeah.
a bigger company and say, hey, you want this
Yeah.
done? I can get you done
Yeah.
in half a day. You can go to your controls and get approvals, which will take you half a
Yeah.
month. You
Yeah.
figure out what you want to do, test
Yeah.
out. And that's what's
Yeah.
happening. You'll see bigger companies picking up smaller companies, not
Mm.
because of only capability. It's just that they can test them so quickly.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Stuff like AI and large
Yeah.
language
I
models.
mean, even
Yeah.
for mammoth companies, even to make a small change
Yeah,
sometimes
Yeah.
takes
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah.
So it's easier to install one of these new startups in a certain specific
Yeah.
area, almost, I wouldn't say risk-free, but at a very diminished risk factor.
Mm.
So test
Mm.
it out, try it out. If it works, great. If it doesn't, then
yeah.
fine. We're still, huge
Yeah.
enough to continue the way we are. All right.
Yeah.
So I guess that would be one thing. Interesting.
Mm.
So in
So
our role, sorry, somebody
no,
was
go ahead, Raju. I was
in
just
our
recapping.
role as now I'm calling you the same role as us, Anjan, as an
Yes.
external consultant, professional expert in the business world. How does our role change, or what do we need to do to move forward?
Uh, so thanks for that question because it keeps me up at night. But
Keeps all
uh,
of us up at night.
but yeah, I think in our line of consulting as a business, I still feel relationships matter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, Whilst you can have a digital marketing plan and all of that,
Yeah. Yeah.
which allows us to be present
Yeah.
Yeah.
and visible, but
Yeah.
necessarily may not yield value. So I
Yeah.
think one of the things that to me is a real, and I'm early days, so people, Nick and Raju being in the
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
but if you ask me the question, I think one of the reflections that I get is I think it is important to go back to that base around really building relationships.
Yep.
Oh,
Going
yes.
and meeting that person and say, hey,
Yes.
this is the value that we create to
Yes.
Mm.
businesses.
Mm.
Yes.
And I think you can't replace that anyways at this,
Yeah.
because we are at the end of the day into a thought
Yeah.
leadership business called
I
Yeah.
consulting.
agree.
The
Yeah.
second important thing that I've really noticed is our entry strategy might need to modify a little.
Mm.
And when I
Mm.
say entry
Mm.
strategy, the world has become one, right? So, for example,
Mm.
Raju, you sitting in
Mm.
Hong Kong, and Nick, you sitting
Mm.
in Kuala Lumpur, I sitting in
Mm.
Bombay.
Mm.
Our entry strategy as nimble firms
Mm.
would typically have to be a little more agile, a little
Yeah.
more. So
Yeah.
whatever products we design needs to be agile, because people are
Yeah.
not looking at, to be honest with you, people are not looking at end to end,
Mm.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
like classical
Mm.
consultant, right? Who like,
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
we'll give you
Yeah.
the entire value chain of
Yeah.
products.
Yeah.
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 But what I'm finding people is, give me this, give me that,
Yeah.
give
Yeah.
me this.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an area that I'm finding, and maybe I'm wrong,
Yeah.
but it's just that people are
Yeah.
going back to this. Okay, let me try this, and we can kind of bring that up.
Mm.
Yeah.
The third
Yeah.
thing, which might be a little provocative, is that I think consulting has become a tech organization. A lot of big consulting
Mm.
firms are doing nothing,
Mm.
but 90% of their work is providing tech solutions,
Mm.
not
Mm.
HR or talent consulting solutions.
Right.
Uh,
Mm.
and I think there is a realization, say, hey, I join a big HR consulting firm with huge paycheck. Most of the work that I'm doing is with public sector companies. Hey, help me out,
Mm.
deploy a capability with tech solutions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
complaint
Yeah.
that the employees get is, Anjan, I'm not doing HR work. Whilst
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
am in HR
Yeah.
consulting, 90% of the work is tech.
Yeah.
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 So you're pretty
Yeah.
much, so HR is pretty much running a tech consulting firm now,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is
Mm.
great. There's nothing wrong
Good
with that.
view. Yeah.
No,
But
no, it's
I think what
direction.
the niche
Yeah.
that we as small nimble firms can do is
Yeah.
provide the HR thought leadership
Yes.
and
Yeah.
deploy tech
Yes.
capabilities as and when it
Yes.
requires.
Yeah.
And I think
Yes.
that's
Yes.
the space that we could
Mm.
contribute, because we don't,
Right.
I mean, I for sure don't want to be a tech company. I don't
Mm.
want to
Yeah.
maintain
Yeah.
servers and somebody calling up, hey, my
Yeah.
user ID
Yeah.
is not working.
Yeah.
That's not
Yeah.
what I'm good at,
No.
Yeah.
No.
right? So I
Yeah.
can hire
Yeah.
somebody who can say, hey,
Yes.
they'll take care of it. But
Yeah.
tell
Yes.
me what you need functionally. That's my
Exactly.
Yeah.
line of thinking.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
honestly, the only reason I asked you this, Anjan, is because you're moving in from a corporate scenario to
Mm.
our scenario
Mm.
now, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I would be considered a dinosaur in this field. So
Mm.
if I actually mentioned that no, we still need to focus on the people side and da 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 and all that,
Yeah.
people would feel that, oh, of course you'll say that because that's your business. So that's why
Mm.
I didn't want to answer that. I wanted to
Yeah.
get it from somebody who's just getting into this and having
Absolutely.
Yeah.
been in
Yeah.
a corporate environment where all the big fish are. So,
No,
uh, yeah,
let me give you some numbers on this. So the leadership coaching business by 2027 is a $50 billion business,
right,
right?
Yes.
And the
right.
leadership coaching is not tech coaching yet.
No,
No.
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 So if that's a $50 billion business going at a CAGR of about 12 to 13% a year,
Right, right.
Yeah.
then I
Yeah.
guess you got to convince me to
Yeah.
say that. I mean, I'm not saying there's no market for tech. Of course, there is market
Yeah.
for
Of
tech,
course.
but
Yeah,
there
Yes.
is
yeah.
still a market for
Yes.
real core leadership,
Yes.
talent, organization development, which is what all of us would. And look,
Yeah.
we can always take tech, borrow tech from different
Yes,
places.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I
It's
mean, there are experts in various areas. So the tech experts are always around, and
yeah.
we can pick and choose that. But
Yeah.
I do kind of echo the thought that you just mentioned. I still think people are, so my basic motto doesn't need to change. People are our important assets. The empathy factor is there. The
Mm.
relationship building factor is there.
Mm.
When you're trying to connect with whether it's your customers, whether it's your stakeholders, whether it's your
Yeah.
shareholders, whether it's your suppliers, vendors, partners, you still need people. And I don't think tech or AI or any of that is going to be able to, well, at least not in the next, I don't see it in the next 10 years where
Yeah.
it'll totally replace that. Because if I'm a partner to a company,
Yeah.
an external partner to a company, and I have to deal with an AI, I'm very soon going to lose interest.
Yeah.
That's just me. But then that's why I said I'm a dinosaur in this field. So
Mm,
uh, that's why I wanted fresh blood to
mm,
talk about
mm,
it. And I'm glad
mm,
you mentioned almost the same thing,
mm,
Anjan. I
mm,
do agree that there is anxiety that AI will replace, I think, certain fractions of what people are doing. I don't think it'll replace the total job,
mm.
because it definitely increases efficiency. It makes things faster, easier. So it should actually make the life of employees a little bit better as long as they are able to grow and learn along with it,
Upskill.
rather than, kind of abstain and say, I don't want to
Yeah.
learn this new stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
So,
and therefore, I think two things matter, Raju. One is, as
mm,
you so rightly said, the existing workforce need to upskill and upskill
Yes.
fast.
yes.
And
Yes.
second is they
Yes.
got to work on their mindset,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is around fixed to growth,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do we, and there's a lot of body of work that we
Yeah.
do around
Yeah.
both those domains. And this is not only
Yeah.
from the private sector, even the governments of different
Yeah.
countries are
Yeah.
realizing this. So there's a lot of
Oh,
work
yeah.
happening saying, okay,
Yeah.
can you make my government bureaucrats and government employees and
Yeah.
government politicians from fixed to growth?
Yeah.
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 And I'm like, amazing, never heard this for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
So absolutely, can't take
Yeah.
a
It's a space where both will still go back and coexist together. Interestingly, I was having a conversation with a client, again, another one, because nowadays it's all about trying to find out from them. And we just kind of had a scenario where I said, let's get into an AI model and ask it about creating psychological safety. That is so tough for it to answer because there's so many nuances in that psychological safety because the organization also had challenges with the new generation.
Yep.
And even at that level, being AI, being tech savvy still is not cutting it for them because these are small elements that you still require people to help
Agreed.
assist you and create those environment.
Right.
Just try typing that using AI and answer psychological safety. It just goes in all different directions, which is not useful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's still a space for coexisting
absolutely,
between the two.
Yeah. So the
absolutely.
the the aspects of empathy and connection
Yeah,
with people,
yeah,
the softer areas, I don't think, I mean, I think I wouldn't say AI won't get there. It probably will if it's as
yeah,
smart, as people are saying it is, and it's like tenfold,
yeah,
hundredfold, then it'll get there. But
yeah,
I don't think that's like going to be next year. So
yeah,
there's still going
yeah.
to be time. The younger generation coming the workforce, what are some of the challenges there, and how do you see, or how would you suggest leaders tackle that?
Mm,
And I'm not saying this as a that younger generation are difficult or challenging. I'm just saying they're a different breed of animals. So it's just, again, going back to our leaders being able to change their mindset and saying, okay, I can't do this today like I did 30 years ago. So I need to change as well. So a mindset has changed for leaders. What would be your suggestions, ideas,
mm.
guidance on dealing with the newer employees of today?
Asking me?
Yes,
Thank
Anjan,
you.
you first, always.
Okay, sorry. No, thanks for that question. I think so. A couple of things as we work with a lot of institutions. When I say
Mm,
institutions, I
Mm.
mean the institution sector in India is booming. They're
yeah,
like
Yeah, yeah,
some 1,500 colleges a day that's springing up.
yeah.
right.
Which is obscene, right? It's crazy.
Yeah,
Wow. Yeah.
So we in the last 1 month we worked with like 4 institutions.
wow.
Wow.
Okay, which basically is what Raju you alluding to in terms of
Mm, Yeah.
that age population,
The young
right?
blood.
The
Yes.
young
Yeah.
blood. And one of the things that I really figured out as my blind spots when I went and, spend a little time with them is around, the whole definition of, and I'm talking in context of a company, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm imagining a
Yeah.
young generation getting into a corporate sector. I'm not
Right.
looking at young generation doing a commercial movie. I don't know
Right.
that space,
Right.
right? So one of my blind spots, which just got really came up, was a couple of things. One is the way they understand business is hugely appreciative and differentiating than probably a very established business dinosaur. Okay,
Mm.
so
Mm.
if you're
Mm.
looking at an established promoter who spent 40
Mm.
years running a company of
Mm.
$5 billion
Mm.
versus a
Mm.
startup of 23 years who's running a company called Zepto, which is a
Mm.
fact,
Mm.
yes.
20 or
Yes.
maybe 21 years.
Right.
Mm. Mm.
If you talk to him and you talk to the other person, fundamentally or diametrically different. I'll give you an example why. So I
Yep.
went and we did some work on board executive presence at the board level.
Right.
And we asked these young entrepreneurs. So there was a set of young entrepreneurs and say, hey, how do you know which company to enter and which company doesn't enter?
Yeah.
And the answer to that was very funny. He said, look, we don't get into profit after tax, profit before tax, EBITDA, gross
Yeah.
margins,
Yeah.
Yeah.
net,
Yeah.
revenue, top line, all of that. Our yardstick is valuations. I mean, the way we look at businesses is how much will it be valued. So we do
Mm.
an all algorithm around valuation. We're less bothered about how much they'll make in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
That is
Right.
diametrically opposite to
Yeah.
Yeah.
what we've
Yeah.
learned 20 years
Yeah.
back in a
Right.
finance
Yeah.
class, in an
Yeah.
MBA, which
Yeah.
is
Yep.
say, hey, you know what? We've all learned the balance sheet
Yep.
and the components
Yeah.
of the balance sheet.
Correct. Yes.
Now,
Yes.
these Johnnies are apparently
Yeah.
analyzing how many times an Ola
Yeah.
or Uber is getting
Yeah.
funded and
Yeah.
what's the message with those frequency of funding, which is,
Yeah.
it just blew
Yeah.
me off. And I
Mind
said,
blowing.
look,
It's
do I
totally
Yeah.
know?
different. Yeah.
Do I know anything about valuations? So I had to go back
Yeah.
and really study about.
Yeah.
I said, don't talk to me about profits. Don't talk. I'm more worried
Yeah.
about what will be valued in the next 5 years.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
And that's scary, right? The entire paradigm of
Mm.
assessing financial results is going, and this is just an example.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
know what if I ask a question about how do you want to manage people, they'll
Wow.
Yeah.
probably get a robot HR manager versus a pod
Yeah.
HR manager and so on. But I think that's the shift. We talked about mindset. That's the shift that we are
Yeah.
seeing for new generations in terms of,
Right.
Mm.
key
Mm.
matrices of businesses are getting challenged or
Yeah.
Mm.
redefined
Yeah.
in terms of running businesses and entrepreneurs. That's
Yeah.
that's that's that's
Mm.
one example that I can give you offhand.
Just one
Mm.
more question,
Mm.
building on that. This was you're alluring to their thinking process and the way they view things, right? What about their ability to communicate with, sorry to say this, but like a older generation like yourself and us, with the younger generation nowadays? How different or how difficult or how challenging is that communication process?
I find it quite challenging.
Mm.
I'll be honest with you
Mm.
because a couple of things come into the foray. One is they have access to information so quickly
Yes.
that what we
Yes.
apparently
Yes.
communicate is already in their pockets.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
a lot of our communication is around less giving information, which is where as
Mm.
consultants we should be
Mm.
wary about
Yeah.
Yeah.
versus providing insights out of that information, which is
Right. Right.
thankfully a little more human,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so the way we, typically a consultant would do is, okay, this is the data and this is how it is an outcome of the
Yeah.
data. But the data is already there with the young chaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
don't waste my time. That's
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
challenge that I have. So I have to change the brief. And when I go and speak to them, I don't take information which already exists.
Right.
Yeah.
Second important thing that I've really found is the attention span.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that has a direct implication to the
Yeah.
products that we design. A lot
Mm.
of people that I'm meeting who
Yeah.
could be or will be potential clients,
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not interested in a 2 day long 8 hour intervention, immersive
No, no.
intervention. They're saying,
Right.
I
Yeah.
just tell me what the concept. I'll read it from the net. Give
Yeah.
me a tool that I can go back to the company and
Yeah.
deploy. I'll tell you
Yeah.
how it looks like. How was the
Yeah.
experience? It's
Yeah.
fast. It's agile. It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
so we've got to
Yeah.
design products and services keeping speed
Yeah.
in mind. And I
Yeah.
think that's a
Yeah.
challenge that I face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because certain
Yeah.
concepts that we allude to are concepts which are what, 50 and more years old,
Yes.
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Start from organization theory or Kirkpatrick
Yeah.
model of learning or
Yeah.
whatever we use
Yeah.
are not ANI or they're not could
Yeah.
fathom that. So I think the
Yeah.
second one is attention span,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
third one is specifically for the Asia Pacific market. They want the best product at the lowest
Yes.
possible cost.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Now,
Mm.
to
And
some, it would be paradoxical, but I
Yeah.
guess that's a reality which bringing to
Yeah.
have. Hey, I don't have time. Give me the lowest
Yeah.
cost, but the best product.
Yeah.
right.
And it becomes really, really challenging to create value as you
Yeah.
design interventions.
But that's interesting when you mentioned that because having been in this industry for 33 years, I don't think that concept has changed at all. Not with the older generation, not with the younger
Yeah.
generation. Give me the
Uh,
cheapest, the fastest,
And the
but the
best.
best. Has to be the best, right? So I don't think that concept has changed. But yeah, it's interesting what you
Yeah.
mentioned about the communication process because with the younger generation, I think our ability to prepare becomes even more critical. So we need
Yes.
to be well prepared. You can't go in with your standard, information because
Yeah.
they probably have it already. In fact, I'm pretty sure they have it already.
Yeah.
So that's why I think that dialogue of
Mm.
walking in with more of, I'm assuming you already have this information, so I'm
Mm.
going to
Mm.
springboard from here. Does that make
Mm.
sense to you? So starting off
Yeah.
on a note like that would probably make
Mm.
more sense than to, go in with the usual
Mm.
consulting of here's all the information we have because they're already out the room.
They know.
Mentally they've gone already.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting concept. I've dealt with obviously with organizations of all kinds, and you have younger generation, you have the older generation in the
Mm.
same class sometimes. So it becomes
Mm.
very interesting. I'm sure Nick
Yeah.
can relate to that as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
We've had
Yeah.
very interesting
Plenty.
conversations where you have the elderly and the young
Yeah.
having it out in class itself with
Yeah.
difference of opinions because they just
I
total
see.
Yeah.
opposites,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
So as
Mm.
a consultant, you some
Yeah.
as an external consultant, you sometimes need to be a mediator more than a facilitator. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think that role is probably going to be continuing on even stronger
Yeah.
rather than diminishing. What's your thoughts, Nick, on that? Do you agree
S-
with
I
that?
I do agree. And the other thing that we have to see is that since we have new generation workforce coming in the future, they're going to be the mass of the workforce.
Yes.
So there's going to be a shift where when we talk about the older generation, it'll be more critical and crucial for them to learn and upskill to be able to interact in the way where and the speed where the newer generation will work at.
Yeah.
So over the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years, that population size is going to be quite a lot in an organization. So in fact, organizations should start preparing for that now itself. I
Mm.
mean, typically when we have managers, leaders, they are typically um, perhaps more experienced with age as well. So to
Mhm.
get them ready to be able to interact with the new generations coming in on board, that's going to be quite
Yeah.
important.
I think apart from the challenge of AI and the anxiety
Yeah.
behind AI, I think one of the other ones is equipping our older
Yeah. Yeah.
managers, leaders, to
Yeah.
be able to move their mindset to be able to communicate
Yeah.
with the younger generation, because otherwise they'll come
Yeah.
into
Absolutely.
Yeah.
total, conflicts and
Yeah.
opposites. And the
Yeah.
younger generation, I found is less patient. So
Mm.
they'd
Yes.
much rather go like, okay, fine, whatever you want, and just walk away from the
Mm.
conversation rather than, waste time and fight over it, because
Yeah.
they'll still go out and do it their own way anyway.
Yeah.
That's what I've noticed.
Anjan, just another quick question for you. Have you also been noticing this when you're working with some of your clients where the new generation, of course, they're looking at valuations of the next 3, 4, 5, 7 years of an organization, making decisions based on that.
Mm.
Have you also come across situations where they're also looking at, does that company reflect on my values as a person growing up or my values as a person? It's not just monetary, but if the company is, let's say, just an example, environmentally friendly, I'll buy into it. If it's not, I'm not going to go into it.
Mm.
Do you see that coming in as well? I've seen some situations where they talk about, does it match my value?
No, I think so. You're right, Nick. I think there are instances where that fit between person organization fit is very critical on the value front.
Mm.
Yeah.
What I've also noticed that they tend to validate those values once they enter
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then check, okay, I don't have too much information when I join, but let me
Mm.
give it a
Okay.
shot.
Yeah.
And then they
Yeah.
spend like 9 months to 10 months and they figure out, oops, that's a problem.
Mm.
Yeah.
Or,
Wrong fit.
okay,
Mm.
Yeah. Wrong fit.
Yeah.
that's
Or
a good
Yeah.
fit.
Wrong fit.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So you've got to go back to your drawing board to say, hey, uh, you know, like, hey, is this attrition because of a value fit, or is it attrition
Yeah.
because I've not paid
Yeah.
the guy well, or
Yeah.
the manager has been bad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a lot of this narrative around you leave the company because of your boss is now
Yeah.
getting reversed to say you leave the
Yes.
company because your values don't fit with your company.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I
Yes.
Yes.
don't
Yes.
believe in the stereotype that you leave because of the boss. Of course, do in some cases,
Yeah.
but you
Yeah.
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 sometimes, or in most of the times, it's more of the
Yeah.
value fit that
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think a lot of as designers and consultants,
Yeah.
this convention and engagement survey should have
Yeah.
more elements of value fit
Yeah.
than
Yes. Yes.
boss fit, which a
Yes.
lot of engagement assessments and then surveys and
Yeah.
questionnaires
Yeah.
don't too much pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So I think, especially
Yeah.
the first 90 days around that value fit is critical.
Yes.
So you should embed
It's
it
Yes.
in your
critical.
onboarding,
Yeah.
onboarding,
Yeah.
sensing, and et cetera, et cetera.
True.
So I
Yeah.
completely
True.
agree, Nick.
Yeah.
It's such an amazing point that you raised because I think,
Yeah.
but they validate. They're a very smart bunch of
Yes.
people. They'll say, okay, you're giving
Yes.
me a hefty paycheck. Let me just get in
Yes.
and see whether it makes sense to me. And they'll take the
Yes.
paycheck and
Yes.
do.
Yeah.
Right.
And imagine that becoming the mass of the population of a company over the next 4 or 5 years. It's even more important for
Yeah,
organizations to focus on it.
that's right. And that's exactly why you see a lot of startups. I
Yeah.
mean, today I would have stayed on with a company because today my values mean that I want to create something different. I want to create
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
which is more
Yeah.
niche to all
Yeah.
three
Yeah.
of us. So
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
value systems have changed, and therefore I have an option to do something. That
True.
Yeah.
option is much more predominant in these days. So
Right.
therefore,
Yeah.
they're not too worried about hanging on till such
Yeah.
time because I'll do my own thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
government is supporting, the ecosystem is supporting, there's funding,
Yeah.
so much
Yes.
things that never happened during our times, right?
True.
So,
True.
so I think yeah, the enablers are there, and that's exactly what's
Yeah.
alluring them to kind of
Yeah.
look at
Yeah.
options.
Hmm. Interesting next 5, 7 years in the whole
Oh
corporate
gosh,
leadership space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Not just corporate leadership, just the leadership space
Yeah.
itself.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Maybe you should start up a new vertical called startup consulting. Kind of
Yeah.
really
yeah.
really advise startups and say, hey, and it already
Yeah.
exists. So there are a lot of
Yeah.
Yeah.
people who advise us saying, hey, you want to start up a
Yeah.
company, this is how it do,
Yeah.
because not too much space. It's all vertical around startup consulting.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially
That's
in
true.
consulting companies, they have
Yes.
startup verticals and all
Yes.
that getting
Yeah.
emerged nowadays.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
interesting.
It just reminds me that traditional 360 assessments and stuff is all thrown out. I mean, it's
They don't
all,
have time for 360, Nick. They don't.
no, it's all thrown out of the window now.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Ah,
the world around us is shifting. I'm not going to use the word changing because that's kind of been used to death already. So
yeah.
it is shifting. and we need to move along with the changes or along with
Mm,
the moves and shifts.
mm,
What I'm going to suggest is, because the podcasts will be too long otherwise, so I'm going to end
mm,
off the podcast,
mm,
and then we can stay on after the podcast to
mm,
talk about other
mm,
stuff in terms of what's
mm,
happening in the
mm,
world of India right now, because you're there,
mm. Yeah.
and any collaboration aspect. So before I end off officially on our EHP podcast with Anjan Bhowmick, let me just ask each one of us to give a sentence or two as what would be our final kind of word of advice to people around
Mm,
us who are listening to this podcast.
mm,
And I don't want to put Anjan on the spot, so I'll start off with the first one this time, and I'll say, um, I think we really need to start shifting our mentality and our mindsets to invite, encourage, and support growth, because growth is the only way to move forward. And if you're growing, the anxiety itself becomes a little bit less as well. So, whoever is out there listening to this podcast, my suggestion is look for ways to enhance, improve, refine yourself, because that is only going to help you in future. All right, so that's my
mm.
two bits. Nick, let's go with you, and then
Yeah.
we'll end off with Anjan then.
So since you've said that, Raju, I'll continue on a different note. So as people, we always need to, especially as HR people, talent teams, need to be looking at least 5 to 7 years down the line to see what's that population coming in, to really equip everyone in the organization to be able to work and coexist together. So that means the different generations, including AI as well, so that we work streamlined and are able to use everybody's best effort, including AI.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
And finally,
So
last but
Raju,
not the
I
least,
think,
Anjan.
yeah. So I think one of the things that I would, humbly request people to do is to not to go with a bouquet of offerings to your client. It didn't work
Yes.
for me. So it's like going to a restaurant and say, hey, this is my menu. You have chicken butter
Mm,
masala, you have lasagna, etc., etc.
Yeah.
mm,
Versus really hearing your clients to see what they need
Mm.
and then
mm,
customize it to the best possible way. And I think that really, forget the business, it really establishes connection,
Yes.
it builds
mm.
relationships, and I think it is more sustainable.
Thank you. So, on an
Welcome.
official note, thank you everyone for watching the podcast. Thank you, Anjan, for
Thank you very much for
giving us
having
the
me.
time.
Yeah.
Nick, thank you, because I
Yeah.
know you're also traveling a lot recently.
Yeah.
It's the end of the year. We're all doing that a
Yeah.
lot, because it's close of business year for most
Yeah.
companies. So a lot of companies are trying to kind of finish off their budgets, which is a very traditional thing that hasn't changed in so many years. At the end of the year, they want to use
Yeah.
up the budget so that they get a better,
Yeah.
bigger budget next year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you everyone for
Yeah.
listening. And until our next podcast, see
Yeah.
you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Anjan, and thank you, Raju, as well. It was great
Thank you.
podcast and look forward to some next ones.
Thank you
Excellent.
so much. Look forward to the
Yeah.
next one.
Wonderful.